afternoon. It's nice to see you. We'll ask you to introduce yourselves in a second. First, we'll introduce ourselves. My name is Murray Snow. I'm the Chief Judge for the Federal District Court in Arizona. Ms. Waller?
So good afternoon. I'm Tammy Waller. I am the Director for K-12 Social Studies and World and Native Languages at the Arizona Department of Education.
Good afternoon. I'm Lynn Simons, and I'm a district court judge in the state of Nevada, and I'm excited to be here and wish you good luck.
Would you please introduce yourselves to us?
Good afternoon. We're Unit 6 from Maine South High School. Our esteemed coaches are Andrew Trankel and Kevin C. Hansen. My name is Tommy Weber.
I'm Matthew Marigo.
I'm Morgan Fanning.
And I'm Maggie Ryan. Thank you for having us today.
Well, thank you. It is a privilege to be able to judge with you. This is Unit 6. What challenges might face American constitutional democracy in the 21st century? And your question is, Thomas Hobbes noted that life in a state of nature is, quote, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, unquote. How has the human condition changed over time? And how is that change reflected in our expectations of government? Should the principles of natural rights or classical republicanism guide policy changes designed to improve the condition of all people? And what are the most pressing domestic and global challenges facing Americans today and in the future? What policies can you suggest to address them? You may begin.
Karl Marx once said, "The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it." While Hobbes interpreted the human condition to be solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, over time, this condition has changed with the advancement of technology and adaptation to the new challenges that our nation has faced. In turn, our standards for government have grown to mean the protector of human safety and security and a provider for the common good.
The basic definition of the human condition is all characteristics and key events that compose the essentials of human existence. Many classical thinkers, such as Hobbes, saw humanity as rough, impure, and outright painful. Thomas Hobbes wrote Leviathan in the 17th century. Dr. Matthew White, our research fellow in English history, claimed that, quote, the 17th century went as years of war, terror, and bloodshed.
The English Civil War led Hobbes to believe that only a strong sovereign could ensure a prosperous nation that protected from these atrocities. Today, we live in a world vastly different from that of Hobbes. Our society has benefited greatly from developments in modern science, technology, and government. Above all, our most basic human rights are protected. This gives us, as a society, the power to search for new rights.
As our society has progressed, we now demand new rights from our government. When our founders broke from Great Britain, their expectations of government were for it to be small and a protector of natural rights. As the founders said in the Declaration of Independence, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
They created the Bill of Rights to limit the powers of the government. However, our expectations of government have changed over time. The 14th, 15th, 19th, and 26th Amendments expanded voting rights to all adult citizens, which then allowed cases like Brown v. Board and Roe v. Wade to be presented to the court, expanding our rights as citizens and our expectations of government.
Governmental policy changes must consider a citizen's income, living location standards, ethnicity, and dependence. Furthermore, classical republicanism should lead in these policy changes to ensure the protection of our individual rights and the societal goal of promoting the common good, while our basic human rights are continuously defined throughout the Constitution, specifically the Bill of Rights. The right to affordable and available healthcare, childcare, and education must also be protected and guaranteed.
Presidents as far back as FDR and Truman strongly advocated for affordable healthcare for all citizens, which still remains a prominent issue within the U.S. Our government must take policy changes with the guidance of classical republicanism to improve the condition of American citizens.
Political polarization is a prominent issue that faces Americans as we stand on the brink of a concerning downfall in our nation. This extreme political climate has been driven by the advancement in the human condition and the modernization of technologies, specifically media outlets and platforms. This prominent issue in America has affected the way that our representatives ratify policies that uphold our expectations of government and endorse the common good. We must implement term limits within Congress and ranked choice voting to ensure more moderate officials are elected to represent our democracy and rid our nation of political extremism.
A pressing global challenge facing Americans today is climate change. If our emission habits remain the same, temperatures will continue to rise and several regions may be unsafe to inhabit. By choosing to ignore this problem, we are essentially limiting our citizens and others' rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
The Biden administration has taken initiative by re-entering the Paris Accord, but we propose the U.S. also meets this updated expectation of government by implementing policies like a carbon tax and emission caps to ease our nation's dependence on fossil fuels and convert to clean energy.
In conclusion, the human condition has improved greatly since Hobbes' remarks in Leviathan because of modernization. With that, our expectations of government have expanded from basic human rights to providing for the common good. While our nation faces issues like political polarization and climate change, we are hopeful that America will overcome these hardships and restore the nation's future. Thank you. We're now open for questions.
Thank you. To what extent can or should the United States facilitate and even subsidize the administration of COVID vaccinations worldwide without creating the perception that it is not serving American interests at home first?
I think definitely it should be the American priority to serve vaccinations to the American people before we start committing to worldwide vaccinations. I think that while it is important to advance the human rights of all with our stance within the United Nations, I think that we should focus internally on the America to ensure that our common good is protected.
Adding to my colleague's remarks, I think it's very important to recognize that America has the highest expectations of government across the board. And throughout making the development of the COVID vaccine, we've seen that we were able to develop one within 1 year, whereas the fastest before that was 4 years, 4 months, which I think is a very large aspect of this whole argument that we need to address and just make sure that we know the expectations that we have of it that we need to bring to other countries.
America is one of the biggest pharmaceutical markets in the world. And so we have the resources and the power to create new vaccines. Also, we saw recently that the US Army has also started making their own vaccine, which will also defend against the new English strains, the South African strains. So it comes to us as Americans to first vaccinate our people. As we said, 25% of our country is already vaccinated. So after that, we have the power and the resources to create more vaccines we can share with the rest of the country once our American people are protected.
Thank you. Ms. Waller?
Okay.
Oh, go ahead,
Okay.
sorry.
No, it's okay. So in your opening statement, you talk about polarization and tension. So to what extent does this polarization and tension come from competing views on whether policies should invoke more of a natural rights philosophy or a classical Republican idea? And how do we bring these polarized groups together?
I think the biggest way we can stop polarization is the message that our government is sending. As you've seen in the last year, we've had many senators and our former president and many representatives attacking each other and villainizing the other side. And I believe that's something that can be very dangerous to the United States and its ability to govern itself. I think this is biggest seen in the way we appoint Supreme Court justices. As of former Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she was approved almost unanimously, only missing, I believe, 4 votes. We had the most recent Justice Amy Coney Barrett only being approved by 1 extra vote.
Yeah, Joshua Tucker, a political scholar, discusses that social media, when it was discovered and developed, was, entered this euphoria that social media will enhance democracy and provide people the power to express their First Amendment more promptly in the United States. And however, they discuss that political scholars, politicians, and many other Americans are becoming weary of what social media has caused our democracy to, and in that political polarization, social media, and misinformation are this sort of triangle that are really causing our democracy to be limited. And so I think that, it is important that misinformation is really something that has been driven by social media to create this polarization. And so I think that definitely that needs to be addressed. However, it is up to the companies like Facebook as well as Twitter and whatnot to give us those restrictions for that would be limiting our First Amendment rights.
Yeah, on top of that, like the debate about classical republicanism and natural rights has been seen really recently with the Second Amendment after many shootings that happened recently, including in Colorado, where people have been talking about maybe that Second Amendment should be more about the common good instead of our natural rights. And like my colleague was saying about the social media, like we see constantly on social media, like we're young people and we always see that everyone's posting their stories like what we should do about how we should change our country. But I think that social media is being causing more polarization, as my colleague mentioned. Like we recently saw where CNN, there was a leaked video of a CNN reporter talking about how they got rid of Trump in office. Like it was their goal to get rid of Trump. And so, but that video was circulating around Twitter and Facebook and it was taken down by the platforms as misinformation, even though it's the clearly executives saying what they're saying. So it comes to the end that social media and media platforms should cause more issues in our country. We fight each other and cause more polarization.
You've taken firm positions on several matters. And what is your position on what organizations the United States should remain a part of in order to address some global challenges?
I think the biggest thing the United States needs to be a part of is the United Nations and the Paris Climate Accord. As climate change is an issue that's going to not only affect Americans in the future, and it's going to affect the rest of the world. But climate change is an issue that as the United States, we can't solve alone, as we can't stop global emissions. We can only control our emissions. So we need to be the leader in the world and lead other countries to come across the same goal of us as stopping climate change and converting to clean energy.
Adding off my colleague, the United Nations, as a member of the United Nations, in 2015, the United Nations came out with Sustainable Development Agenda. And I think that, and in that agenda, they list 17 goals that include poverty, clean water, climate change, and many others that, I think that it is important that the U.S. promotes these 17 Sustainable Development Goals as a part of the members of the United Nations to better the human condition and push forth, as my colleague mentioned, report to clean energy and whatnot.
Many people have proposed the stance of isolationism, but I really would argue that as the US is the strongest power in the world, I think that's very unrealistic. We see in the 1940s, many politicians and government officials came together to form the America First Committee, deeming that they should not be involved in World War II. However, after we were attacked at Pearl Harbor, that committee basically fell apart. And I think that really shows that it's unrealistic in the sense of America not being involved in global situations because of the power that we have.
How far can the U.S. or how can the U.S. engender fair elections and at the same time gain the confidence of its citizenry in the election results?
I think one great quote about this is what FDR once said. He said that the only safeguard to democracy is education. And so a big part is that we need to have fair and like our social media, like we mentioned social media and media is like polarizing our people. So we have to find a more moderate media sources that we can actually like talk about what's really happening in America, not just villainizing the other side. So because what we saw with our 2020 election, that one group was, oh, is the election's rigged, like Trump won for sure. And the other way was saying that like, oh, it was no way it was rigged. So we need to have more fair and honest news medias and social medias where we can actually talk about what's actually affecting the country.
Yeah, what my colleague is alluding to is the concept that Robert.
We have the time. Thank you. Well, thank you. You did, it's my privilege to provide some feedback if you want it. I'm a judge and there's a court reporter who takes down everything I say. And sometimes when parties are going so fast, I can't understand them. I blame it on my court reporter and I say, slow down so she can get it all down. I would say that you had a whole lot of things to say and you said them so quickly that it was kind of hard to keep up with you. You gave some very intriguing examples that I would have liked to pursue further about the affirmative assertion that healthcare, childcare, and education, the rights to those things are affirmative rights that are now recognized. I'd love to come back and push back with you on those and have a nice discussion with you. But the one downside to saying a lot of things is sometimes you can't really explore them in the depth that you want to explore them. So I would say sometimes maybe think about what you've said and think about covering them just a little bit more and being selective in your choices, but engaging, a very engaging presentation.
So excellent job. I think that you guys did a really great job of laying out the historical changes over time with examples and philosophical principles. And I really liked how you did that and really set the stage for how the role of government has changed in the modern time. And I thought you did a nice job applying, oops, sorry, my headphone fell out, constitutional principles through Bill of Rights and subsequent amendments, and then going back to some founding documents. I thought that was really good. You had some really great examples. The one thing that I would say is, and this goes along with slowing down a little bit, it's slowing down before you answer the follow-up question and kind of thinking about what is the underlying thing that the follow-up question is asking me. So you can like address immediately that issue and then build from that with bringing in those other examples. But I thought you did a really great job. I thought you had great energy, enthusiasm, and passion for the topic, and brought in some things that we haven't heard yet.
I agree with my colleagues, and I would just, as you go forward, make sure that you center yourselves and take a deep breath before you begin, because it is true, we want to hear every word, and at some point I think you could have slowed your pace just a bit. What I enjoyed about your testimony is this question is very hard to actually cite to constitutional provisions, and you did that, and you made an effort to do that. I appreciated that. In addition, I like that you took a position. You know, this is what we must do. And when I asked my question about the world organizations, you answered it, and you gave a priority of why, and it supported your testimony and your position on climate change. If I were to offer one, another constructive criticism, it would be careful about word choice. A couple of times I heard what not, and I would be very careful about using that term because it's almost like a filler or like etc. And we want to hear exactly what you mean. So I would caution about saying that. I really liked in the beginning too that you gave a definition of the human condition. You just laid it out there. And I thought that was very effective. I really enjoyed it. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.